Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and never shall be, world without end. Amen. How you doing, guys? This is Scholastic Puda. This is like my third live stream. This is, I'm new to this. I don't really know how to go live. But I have a good stream for you guys today. We're going to talk about justification. We're going to talk about predestination. We're going to have a couple of guests come on. I'm expecting Edwin Nunez. He has a YouTube channel called Scholasticism Reformed. He's going to come on. He's going to talk about predestination, double predestination, how that relates to the Reformed tradition, Roman Catholic tradition. We're also going to have Inquisitor come on. I'm going to send him a link. He's going to come on after Edwin, and I'm going to try to get someone else to come on. But first, let's get Edwin in here. Let me see. Let me send him a link so we can get him in here. But yeah, so that's what we're going to talk about. He recently released a video. Let me see. Let me pull up this here. Let me see. He recently released a video. It's called Catholics on the Language of Double Predestination. It's really good. I think you guys should check it out. He should be joining any moment now. So we'll be waiting on him. I sent him a link. So he should be coming on. Let me see. What else? Okay. And so while we're waiting on him, let's pull up some stuff. So, the stuff we're going to go on Justification. I'm going to go on Newman. I'm going to read some Newman on his treatise on Justification. There's lectures, actually. Let's pull it up here. We're going to go through his appendix. I'm going to read through that a little bit. And I think that would be it. So let's just get Edwin in here. We got Edwin here right here. So let's just go back to this. All right, Edwin, I'm going to bring you up. Yo, how you doing, man?
What's up?
What's up? Right now we only got one viewer, but we should get more in a minute. I'm about to tag you into a tweet.
Oh yeah.
So we can get people to come in. Inquisitor should be hopping on right after we get done. Talk about justification, but I've already introduced you, but I'll let you introduce yourself. So I'll just give you like a minute or two to introduce yourself, what you do, about and stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah. So I have my own channel, right? Scholasticism Reformed, but my actual name is just Edwin. I like to read some of the medievals and fathers sometimes, but my main interest is in early modern authors. So early modern scholastic Lutherans, Reformed, Roman Catholics, whether it's Jesuits, Thomists, etc. I have other interests too, right? Like computer science, but my main stuff online is all early modern theology stuff.
Okay, yeah, I appreciate that introduction. So you guys should check him out. I'm going to go ahead and I'll post your Twitter and your YouTube in the chat right quick. So let's all right, here's Edwin's YouTube, and let's get his Twitter in the chat. Copy. Okay, So I mean, Edwin just recently released a video that's been anticipated. He released it about 2 weeks ago. Let's bring it up on the screen. Released a video called Catholics on the Language of Double Predestination. I had to take a second watch, only got to get to 16 minutes of it, but I watched this is about my second time watching it. And I think it's really helpful. And so I guess we're just going to get into like I guess I have a couple of questions. Um, Nothing hard. I mean, the first thing is going to be like, okay, what exactly, what, just go ahead and like define predestination. How would you define it?
Yeah, so first I should note that there are different definitions. And so it's going to depend. My definition, along with that of other authors, is going to depend on whether one is considering predestination, strictly speaking or properly speaking, they'll say, or whether you're considering it improperly or broadly speaking. Broadly speaking, it is just God's preordaining of a certain end to come to pass, right? So these offers, and I agree with them, they'll say, if you take predestination broadly speaking, that is God's ordaining of a rational creature towards any end, whether that is beatitude or, yes, even punishments. But properly speaking, I agree with them. It's funny, the first time I found myself agreeing with Bellarmine was on this topic because he notes how it's just a custom of the scholastics in their day and ever since the medievals to refer to predestination, properly speaking, as God's ordaining of a rational creature to beatitude. And they say that because that's, well, they give different reasons, but the main one that everyone's really going to agree with is because that's how the New Testament talks about predestination. You don't really see it used with respect to the reprobate. Um, so yeah, that's the general definition.
And would you say that this definition is pretty much agreed upon between the Reformed and Roman Catholics?
Oh yeah, yeah, for
Okay.
sure. They even draw from Augustine to make the same points, and Fulgentius.
Okay. Yeah, so we got the definition of predestination, and I heard that you said that predestination not only includes. It sounds like you said that predestination is not only in the supernatural order, but it could be understood naturally. Um, and that it's not only to beatitude, but it's also to damnation, right?
Yeah.
It could be understood that way. Okay.
Yes. Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, you see that language in the Augustinian tradition.
Okay. Um, let's see. Let's move to. Let me see. Okay, so I want to kind of tackle predestination generally, and then like for like the first 10 minutes, and then we can get into double predestination, because I know that's basically the main point of your video. Um, Let me ask you this: how would you define? Let's do reprobation. Just go ahead and define reprobation quickly.
Yeah, so this is also going to depend on whether one has like negative or positive reprobation in mind, and we'll get into that as well because that's also something that needs to be discussed. And it's also going to depend on like whether you're considering reprobation, and you'll see this in the video whenever I put out the second part. But it's also going to depend on whether you consider reprobation absolutely or comparatively,
Okay.
right? But for the most part, I think that one way to consider reprobation that broadly people are going to agree with is that it's God's passing over or permitting individuals to fall into sin, right? That's going, and some, like, this is another thing that is debated, whether you want to define reprobation, specifically negative reprobation, and include a positive will to exclude certain people from glory. And that is the opinion of some Catholics. The Reformed don't really comment on it from what I've seen, but there is debate among Catholics with respect to, yeah, whether you should say that negative reprobation consists in a positive will. of excluding some. And from what I recall, that you'll see that in Banez and Alvarez, even in John of St. Thomas and the Salmaticenses. And then others disagree with that, like Bill Yards, Zumel,
Yeah, I
etc.
mean, I think that's kind of ironic that Catholics have such a problem with like the language of double predestination and this idea of God like predestinating a person to damnation, where when our authors, like you say, and I'm not familiar, like I'm really just a novice into like the predestination conversation, but what you say sounds like there's actually authors that do say that God positively wills some to damnation.
Yes.
So it's not just like a mere permitting to fall away, but there's like a
Yes.
yeah, and you said it's funny because like that's present in a lot of the Catholics that you have read, but it's actually not present in a lot of the Reformed, which is
Yeah.
something that a lot of people actually criticize the Reformed. They characterize the Reformed as having that position and seeing that as something that's like morally reprehensible, but that's ironically in like Catholic tradition.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah. And they try to explain what they mean by it. It's funny. There's there's attempts to try to reconcile this later on. Um, and I think they can work. Because this, and you know this, a lot of these issues sometimes are just like disputes over language. I
Yeah.
think this is one of them. Even people arguing against it, like I mentioned, Bill Ewart, he even says, like, he tries to give them an out and says that if this is what they mean by positive, then it's not that big of a deal. And I think it seems obvious that, like, they're not saying in a heretical sense. Some would try to disagree, but I think that, yeah, it's one of those things that's just a dispute over terminology. And Bill Yard, even, that's what he says. He says that they offend in their terms.
Yeah. Okay. Um So I heard you make like a distinction between like you made some distinction between like positive reprobation or positive predestination, negative reprobation,
Hmm.
negative predestination. Um or and then I think you made a distinction between like the will of God. So could you just explain the distinction between like something that's being positive or negative, something that's antecedent and something that's
Yeah. Yeah. So one thing that is like synonymous with that distinction is between preterition and predamnation. So when we consider God's negative reprobation, all we have in mind is his passing over of some, right? His not choosing some, right? So when he elects certain people to glory, there are others that are by the same in the same instant not chosen, right? Logically speaking, and this comes up all the time, whenever, like, I wouldn't say this of all Lutherans, but at least the stereotype of Lutherans online is like they'll say, we don't believe in double predestination, we believe in single predestination. And then people say, well, how does that work, right? Because if God doesn't elect some, then, right, logically speaking, there if he elects some, logically speaking, there are others that are not elected, right, infallibly. So that's what preterition has in mind. There are some that are left behind in the massa damnata, right? And so that's all that is. Suarez and others will also refer to it as a non-predestining. Um, so yeah, it's just him not choosing. It's that group of people that he has not chosen. Whereas positive reprobation, all that is that's typically what people have in mind, which is condemnation. That is when he actually damns someone, which has to be on account of sin, right? Because there is no punishment without guilt. And so, yeah, when God positively predestines, that is his condemning a person on account of their sins. And so there's no debate about the latter, right? With positive reprobation, everybody agrees. Obviously, you can't condemn someone to hell apart from demerits. So everyone's agreed on that. They do think that Calvin doesn't agree with that, and I'll talk about that in the video. But I don't think that's true of Calvin. But that is he is kind of like the boogeyman for that position. Like, everyone's saying nobody believes in this, right? That positive reprobation is apart from demerits, except for Calvin, right? That's where he erred. But they'll say that he didn't err on the notion that with negative reprobation, there is no motive, right, or cause for why God doesn't choose some over others. That is purely on the basis of his will. You know, it's ironic. You'll see them quoting Romans 9 to prove it. Oftentimes, the references to before they had done good or evil, right? Talking about Jacob and Esau. And regardless of whether people think that that is a good interpretation, that historically, that is what you see a lot of early modern Catholics doing. They're quoting Romans 9 to prove this position that people attribute to the Calvinists, right? So,
Okay. So, and I know there's some more distinctions, so we can clarify. But so far, does this look good? So I have, I obviously got some grammatical issues, but oh no. So predestination is ordaining a rational creature to a particular end. Reprobation is basically that predestinating will that's in relation to damnation.
yeah.
Preterition is some those some are those those who some or those who are left behind in the massa damnata, which is the non predestining. Then you have what we mean by negative is merely a permission. What we mean by positive is just it's a not a permitting. Negative reprobation. Obviously, I know there's a consequent and an antecedent, but negative reprobation is choosing not to give grace, choosing not to not go, but give grace. And positive reprobation is God choosing to punish on the basis of demerits. Does that sound right so far?
Yeah. And of course, people would qualify by saying, well, like, he chooses to give even the reprobates sufficient grace. But yeah, like the grace in mind here that he chooses not to give them is the grace of ordaining them infallibly to glory, right? But yeah, that if that's what specifically is had in mind, then yeah, he chooses not to give that to them. A lot of the offers will refer to it as an unowed benefit,
Okay.
and some very obscure offers I've seen will quibble with that and say that it's not to be considered an unowed benefit, and they have their arguments for that I need to review more. But yeah, for the most part, Catholic offers refer to the grace of glory being an unowed benefit.
Okay. Let's quickly get into the distinction between like antecedent and consequent, so we could like get more specific about what we mean between negative reprobation, positive reprobation. So just explain the distinction between antecedent and consequent.
Yeah, well, that doesn't really come up that much in these discussions, but yeah, the antecedent consequent will, and some might quibble with the specific language of it, even among the reformed at times. But the basic understanding of it is just that God antecedently, when He antecedently wills something that's apart from any other kinds of conditions, right? Whereas the consequent will is what He wills in light of certain things. So people, and I think this is what Saint Thomas gives, right? That the example that he gives is that of a judge, right? In his, according to the judge's antecedent will, he is not desiring that any of the citizens be placed under capital punishment, right? That's not his desire going in the work, because he's the one that has to carry out that decision, and so he's not desiring to do that. But obviously, if someone comes in to the court and that is a proportionate punishment for their crime, then yeah, consequently, uh, he does will to carry out justice and to punish that person. Um, so yeah, that's the basic.
Okay. 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 So we got the antecedent will, consequent will. Yeah, negative reprobation, positive reprobation. Do you mind if we just throw this together? Like give an example. Like it first of all, whether there is a such thing. So we'll do like negative first. So we'll say, okay, negative antecedent reprobation negative consequent reprobation, even if there is one, right? So like we can take the negative first. So you want to do? Is there such thing as a negative antecedent reprobation?
Yes, yeah. That would be that's just the way that we refer to the basic position that negative reprobation is not caused by forcing demerits. So the antecedent part in the phrase is expressing the fact that God's decree to not choose these individuals is antecedent, logically, of course. This is about time, but logically antecedent to his foresight of their demerits, right? It's not based upon their demerits that he
Okay.
chooses, so it's
So
antecedent to it.
so him choosing not to give grace is before the consideration of demerits or merits or
Right.
demerit. Okay.
That's
So
the
it's
negative
basically
antecedent
choose
reprobation position.
not to give grace before merits slash demerits. All right. Okay. And then is there a negative consequent reprobation?
I wouldn't say so. So that would be the position that people attribute to Calvin, but or rather, positive antecedent reprobation would be negative consequent. I've never seen that language used.
Okay.
It's really just the first one and then positive antecedent
Okay.
reprobation, and no one really believes that. As for the one for that one you're giving now, that's really, I guess you could, if you want to use that terminology, that would be the position of some, not all, Jesuits, that when God chooses not to give glory to some, it is after the consideration of demerits. You even find this
Okay.
among some Augustinians, I found surprisingly. And by Augustinians, right, I don't just mean that how we use it colloquially, but those of the Augustinian order, like Giovanni Berti, I think he takes that position. Specifically, that negative reprobation is based upon foreseen original sin. So that's the position that some take.
Okay. Okay, so now we're on positive antecedent reprobation. What is that? Does anybody hold to that?
I would say no, but people, these offers, they attribute that to Calvin, and that's just the belief that God actually, like, apart from and prior to his foreknowledge of demerits, chooses to damn certain individuals to hell, which would obviously be unjust. But no, I don't think.
Basically, choose, so like God can't choose to damn someone to hell before he even without even considering sin in
Right.
the creature. Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
And that's what they think
Uh,
Calvin teaches. Um, but yeah, of course, I'm going to dispute that. I'm a Calvin apologist.
okay.
Not everyone has to be, but and I will say I can understand why some people might not like the language that he uses. But I don't think it's fair to say that he actually believes in that.
Okay. All right. Lastly, positive consequent reprobation. What is that? Does anybody hold to that?
No, I don't think so. I don't
No.
think this believe in a category people give.
Okay. Okay. So now we laid out the reprobation. We laid out the different views. So now let's get to double predestination because we have a few more minutes.
Mm.
Um, so where would double predestination even fit into these categories, or if it does, and
Mhm.
how would you define it? Let's just do that.
Yeah. So I tell people, and I'll preface it with this, that I'm not a huge apologist for, like, saying that one must use the language of double predestination, but the fact is that it has been used by Catholic scholastics in the past. It goes back, to our knowledge, at least. I've seen not just Wagner say this, but cinema documents this. That the farthest we've seen it go back to is from Isidore of Seville, um, and that's like 700s, I believe. And yeah, so he says that predestination is double, and that's just explicit. So that's the first thing I'll say. But it can be understood, properly speaking. It can be understood in an orthodox way, and if someone wants to use it, what they typically mean is the same as that of what you highlighted in negative antecedent reprobation. That's all that people are saying when they're talking about quote double predestination. They're talking about that position. And so I use them synonymously when I'm talking about the position, because that's all that they mean. Um, so yeah, that's the gist of
And
it.
so people confuse double predestination with positive antecedent reprobation.
Yeah, I
Okay.
think that's right.
Because and it's because I think I've seen something in St. Thomas, and it's because people think that the causal relation of reprobation with predestination, like in the predestinating to glory,
Yeah.
is the same. They have like the same causal kind of relation.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, okay.
Yes. That's a big thing as well. The other language that gets brought up is symmetrical versus asymmetrical, right? That predestination and reprobation, or election and reprobation, whether they are symmetrical or asymmetrical. And people think that, and like nobody believes this. Like, and we dunk on the modern Calvinists all the time, but even they don't believe this. Like their way of making this distinction is they call it equal ultimacy, right? Because not even they affirm it. They all say that's equal ultimacy. We don't believe that because that view is insane. And so, like, I don't know where people get this idea that the reforms are positing a symmetrical relationship between the two acts.
Yep.
But there isn't. All the reform deny it, and they give this example, and I've seen it from a few different authors, from George Kendall, from John Davenant, and from others, where they talk about how not every effect, or not every, yeah, not everything that flows from reprobation is caused by it, right? Not every consequent is an effect. So they give the example of the sun, right? And the analogies between the sun and darkness, and then God and evil, or reprobation in this sense. And just like God, just like the sun's rays not shining on something, withholding its rays, just in the same manner that that doesn't cause darkness, right? God's reprobation, or his permitting individuals to fall into sin, his not choosing them, that doesn't cause them to sin, right?
Correct.
So sin is not caused by reprobation, which Aquinas, if you read his stuff on reprobation in question 23, he makes this point as
Yeah.
well.
I mean, let's just read it right quick. I mean, so this is objection 2, and let me know if this is actually related, because I think this is the one I remember. St. Thomas says, this is objection first. It says, objection 2, further, if God reprobates any man, it would be necessary for reprobation to have the same relation to the reprobates as predestination has to the predestined. But predestination is the cause of the salvation of the predestined. Therefore, reprobation will likewise be the cause of the loss of the reprobate. But this is false, for it is said in Hosea 13:9, destruction is thy own, O Israel, thy help is only in me. God does not then reprobate any man. His response, reprobation differs in its causality from predestination. This latter is the cause both of what is expected in the future life by the predestined, namely glory, and of what is received in this life, namely grace. Reprobation, however, is not the cause of what is in the present, namely sin, but is the cause of abandoning it by God. It is the cause, however, of what is assigned in the future, namely eternal punishment. The guilt proceeds from the free will of the person who is reprobated and deserted by grace. In this way, the word of the prophet is true, namely, destruction is thy own, O Israel. Is that anything related to what you just said?
Yeah, yeah, that's the same thing. And it's especially related because sometimes I'll see, whether it's lay Catholics or apologists, if they're even familiar with this. Most of the times they're not, but if they are even a little familiar with Aquinas, they'll try to reference this against the Reformed. They'll say, see, this is the difference between what Catholics believe about reprobation and Calvinist double predestination, right? And they'll cite this section from the Summa. But the Reformed make the same exact point. Like, I'll
Okay.
quote something from George Kendall. Um, let me see. So here's a Reformed author saying, making the same points, saying, quote, sins follow reprobation, damnation sin, but though sin be the cause of damnation, reprobation is not the cause of sin. Otherwise, then, as the non-shining of the sun is the cause of darkness. Now, will you impute the darkness of the night to the sun? no more can you the wickedness of men to God. It is true, the darkness, of course, follows the absence of the sun, and wickedness the withstanding of God's grace, but neither the absence of the sun nor the withstanding of God's grace have any actual influence or causality.
Okay. Is there any particular um Roman Catholic authors who I know you have it on your stream. Anyone in particular when we pull up as a quote before we get off of this, that explicitly talks about double predestination? I mean, we can go over is it or quote, but anybody else who use may even it's not use a language has that concept that you wanted to go over?
Yeah, I mean, even in the first one, the concept itself will be more so the second video, but even in the first one, there were some other offers. I think Viggers, Johannes Viggers was one of them.
Let me see.
Uh,
That's not him. Oh, let's see. How far do you think is in the video? Let me
a
see.
little more.
Um, let me see.
There, he actually uses it as well. You can
Okay,
see that.
let's check him out for. Let's start right here. Let's put it on full screen. It says this term predestination, and this is a Jesuit. This term predestination is used chiefly in two ways. First, generally of any divine predefinition and preordination. And in this way, it extends to all things that God has decreed from eternity, either to do himself in time or to procure to be done through the creature. For all these things are said to be predestined according to Dionysius on the Divine Names, chapter 5. In this way, some are said to be predestined to glory, others to punishment. And thus, St. Fulgentius wrote a small book on double predestination. Secondly, it is used strictly for the eternal determination of a rational creature to salvation.
Yeah.
That was a pretty clear one.
And yeah, Viggers will say the same thing. It's interesting. I don't think I noted this in the video, but I couldn't find. There's no actual work from Fulgentius called on double predestination.
Okay.
What I think they're referring to is probably you'll see variant like names for it, and what I think they're referring to is book 3, to Monimus. Is likely what they're
Okay.
referring to because that's where he refers to this this notion of double predestination. He'll also use language like instead of gemina, he'll use duplici, which is also just double in Latin. So
Okay,
that's what I think they're referring to.
let's read this last quote. This is Johannes Wiggers. He says, quote, thus also the compound, how you pronounce it in Latin?
Predestina.
Predestino, and the term derived from it, predestinatio, is generally taken namely for preordaining toward any end, whether that be eternal retribution, blessedness, or eternal punishment. But nevertheless, it must be noted that although God preordains and prepares punishment for sinners, he nevertheless does not preordain and prepare their wills towards sin. In this general sense, St. Augustine sometimes uses that term in Book 15 of the City of God, chapter 11, and Book 21, chapter 24, where he says that certain people are predestined to death, namely to eternal punishment, but not to sin. In the same sense, Fulgentius entitles a certain book on double predestination. So Wiggers is also citing the same book that the Jesuit that we just read. Okay, on the one of the good to glory, the other of the evil to punishment. And this is exactly what you think the Reformed and even Calvin is teaching, and then is in agreement here, right?
Yeah, especially the Reformed. There's not the big boogeyman in this is more so Calvin because you'll see this in the second video as well. But like some of these offers, some of these Catholic offers, they'll even concede that this is the opinion of the Reformed and they are Orthodox on this doctrine. But the funny thing is on this particular point about reprobation and other things like free will and efficacious grace, they'll say that the later Calvinists departed from their master Calvin is the language that they'll use. I don't think that's true, right? But it's interesting. There's an entire chapter about this in this other work called Beyond Dort and De Auxiliis, called Calvin Against the Calvinists in Early Modern Thomism, which is drawing from like Basil Hall, who, and from the Reform side, a lot of people kind of know about this, how his thesis is the opposite. It's that the Calvinists, after Calvin himself departed from Calvin, and that was a bad thing because they became more scholastic, they became more Aristotelian. And so that was his thesis, and people critique it. Moeller critiques it. But it's kind of a play on that, saying that the Dominicans kind of believe the same thing, but in the opposite way. They believe that the Calvinists departed from Calvin, but that was a good thing, that they became more scholastic and more Aristotelian and more precise. So I think that both are wrong in their conclusions, but I agree that there is development in the Reformed tradition and that the later Reformed are more precise than Calvin himself. I just don't think that Calvin actually held to heretical views on this in substance. And he defends himself actually against this accusation, decades before these writings are even had.
Okay. Okay, I appreciate that. I guess we'll just answer a few questions. And then I'll let you go.
And I could say to Henry that Puda's actually been trying to give me. I still haven't read Sheben, so I can't answer any questions about him yet. But I will read him because I know Puda
Okay.
wants.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll send you some of the material.
Inquisitor's doing it though, right? Henry could ask
Yeah, he
Inquisitor.
could. Yeah, Inquisitor should be coming on in a minute.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, I'll send him a link in a minute. So let me just ask you some questions. Some of this is kind of still on predestination, and I just something that I'm not well read on it. I'm still a novice on this stuff. What do you what would you say to a person who is skeptical about predestination and how it relates to man's freedom? What would you say to a person that, like, how I know this has always been like
Mm-hmm.
that's even a debate amongst Roman Catholics, and this has been a debate throughout history about how predestination and reprobation and all this can preserve the freedom of man. So, I mean, quickly, what would you say about how would you explain free will under this?
Yeah, it's well, I can give a basic answer because
Yeah, feel
it can
free
get
to.
pretty. Yeah, I'll say first that it can get pretty complicated because there are different attempts to reconcile the two, so to speak, right? Even among the Reformed, there's not unanimous agreement. Like I know Inquisitor himself rejects physical premotion. I'm leaning that direction, but obviously there are some offers that are going to affirm it, whether Reformed or Roman Catholic, and they don't think that there is an issue with believing in it and genuine free choice. But if someone just has like doubts about predestination simpliciter, right? Like how does predestination, if they're just like referring to unconditional election, right? God's
Yeah,
choosing some and not others, and free will, my general response to them is that there's nothing. Well, first, people have to they have to posit what they think is even mutually exclusive with the two that they don't find to be mutually exclusive with God's foreknowledge of all things and still having free choice. And I try to guide people down that direction because you know people make fun of the James White thing. Uh, for those who know, right? He's well known for saying that line about, and it's kind of cringe, but he kind of has a point about how he'll say the only consistent Arminian is an open theist, and it's like, well, I don't think White himself even knows what he means by that, but it can be true if what he means is like typically the arguments that people give against like God's predestining are the same arguments that open theists do make against God's foreknowledge, right? So they're the same arguments. People will say, well, how can we have free choice if God foreknows what we're going to do, right? And then people will say, well, it's because he doesn't cause us to do it. But that doesn't really resolve the issue, right? Because what they're saying is they don't care about causality. They're just
Yeah.
asking if this is in some way fated, which is sloppy language, but they'll say if this is fated, this infallibly will come to pass because God foreknows that it will come to pass.
Yeah.
Then how can it be free?
Okay.
And that's the open theist objection. But the simple response is that just because something is infallible, right? Something infallibly comes to pass. That doesn't mean that it isn't free. And nobody really believes that. Like you just ask your general lay Christian, like, do
Yeah.
you think we'll have free will in heaven?
Correct.
Presumably they will say yes. I hope so. If you ask them, do you think we will still be sinning in heaven? That we could still be sinning? Presumably they would say no. I hope so.
Okay.
I
Okay.
feel like those would be the normie answers, which would be correct. Unless you have like some schizo out there that rejects one of those two. But for the most part, people are gonna say, yeah, like we're gonna have free will in heaven, and we won't be able to sin. Like that's the whole point of
Okay.
glorification. And if that's the case, then what's contradictory about God predestining some to infallibly attain glory and still having free choice? So
Okay.
it's a long kind of discussion, but the gist of it, the general direction is I try to get people to question their assumptions about what constitutes free will, because people have a lot of, and people don't know this, especially if they're laymen. They do have like philosophical assumptions about how they define these things. They've never really thought them through.
I think you're right about that. Um, and I think that's really important. And some people actually just don't want to think things through, which is, I know it's frustrating. You've dealt with people like that for years. I see you going on Twitter, talking to people, and
Oh,
listening. I got one more question, and I think that'll be it. And it's on the universal call.
mm-hmm.
I know my view is that the universal call is basic. Excuse me. Excuse me. The universal call has to do with like God's antecedent. God. Then like there's this kind of on the antecedent will of God. There's this kind of motion of like God's like sufficient grace, which is like calling or ordering all to God as an end.
Yeah,
And then this call can be something that's expressed in the creature, or I guess even in internally or externally. So like there's this call of the gospel, just got like this gospel call, and there's like this call internally, like a movement of the soul
yeah.
towards God. I know that there might be some diversity. You can correct me, but how do you understand the universal call? What is your opinion on it? Just go ahead and just talk. Talk about whatever you want to say about it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I generally agree with everything you were saying. There is some diversity on that topic as well because it relates to a lot of other debates. But yeah, I mean, I just generally agree with the notion that there's a universal call for, universal implying not just the elect, but the reprobate, because of course I think he died for the reprobate. And so since he died for them, there is a well meant offer that is extended even to them, which is true, right? It is genuine that if they were to believe, then they would be saved. And that can be preached to the non elect because it is genuine. It is a true gospel offer.
Okay. I mean, I said it was gonna be one more question, but this is my last one, and this one might be a little tougher. And if you don't have an answer, that's fine. I've struggled with this myself, and I've just rested and trusted on Christ and the mercy of God and His justice. But like the way I understand the predestination stuff is like, okay, everyone has some kind of sufficient grace, right? And okay, what do I mean by that? So like, okay, everyone has some kind of sufficient grace, but that sufficient grace doesn't terminate into efficacious grace because there's some kind of impediment on the part of the creatures.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and the removal of that impediment is on the basis of God giving some I don't know, extra kind of grace to who he chooses to give, and that and those who he chooses to give, some extra grace or whatever, that will terminate in them being justified, and if they remain in it, they will be glorified. Is that like a picture that you kind of understand, or that you agree with?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, I would agree. And there are going to be different answers as to like why God chooses to have that sufficient grace terminate in some and not others, right? Or what the efficacy of grace consists in, right? My position, I affirm, I'm not a congruist, so I'm going to affirm that it's something about the grace itself, right, that makes it efficacious. Whether that's like physical premotion or not is up in the air for me. That's some people's answer. Uh, but I'm not
Okay.
completely set on that.
Okay.
But I am going to affirm, but I do want to affirm that it's something in the grace. I don't want to affirm the congruous position. And I don't, yeah, because I don't take a middle knowledge view. And I definitely don't take the view that Bellarmine attributes to others like Molina and Lessius, that the only reason we call it efficacious grace is literally because the intended outcome actually came to pass. So like he'll say like what kind of notion is that the only reason that sufficient grace and efficacious grace are distinguished is because efficacious grace is just when sufficient grace does what God wanted it to.
Yeah.
That because it's a very even Bellarmine thinks that it sounds like a Pelagian view, right? That you make sufficient grace efficacious.
Okay. And the reason why I say I was struggling with that, because I have read in the STS, there's like they have a problem with not. They think that doesn't really make salvation. They think like the Dominican or the Thomistic conception of predestination doesn't really make salvation really possible for all. There's arguments.
Yeah.
I'm slightly familiar with it. Like, I'm not an expert, so I'm not gonna like somebody
Right.
questions me on it, I'm gonna be like, yeah, but I don't know. But
And
yeah.
yeah, I mean those are difficult questions, and it's even like you can find like there's a big question of whether Bayesian physical premotion is even like the Dominican view, right? Because you're gonna have people like Zumel that descend from it, and I want to read more on Zumel. The stuff that I have on him so far is in Spanish, so I can read it thankfully. But read more on Zumel, and especially actually, there's a book by Father Martin Sola who goes against Lagrange, and
It's called Don't Resist the Call.
yeah, that's right.
Yeah, Don't Resist the Call. Yeah, I've read a
So
little bit.
it's
Um,
on this topic. So yeah,
yeah.
it is difficult.
Okay. Yeah. I really do appreciate you for coming on. This is like my third ever stream. I'm trying to get better at streaming, but I really do appreciate you coming on. I'm going to show your YouTube channel again. Let me see, Scholasticism Reform, and we'll show your Twitter. But everyone should go ahead and give Edwin a follow. Put it back in the channel. Um, uh, what's the name? Inquisitor asked the question. He says, "Do you follow SCOTUS on reprobation?" I don't know if you are familiar with SCOTUS's view on
Well,
reprobation.
oh, well, I have read SCOTUS. I guess I need to know what he means, like what aspect of it, because it's it's odd. I find different authors like trying to use SCOTUS for their position and quoting different sections of it of him to prove it from the Ordinatio.
Yeah.
And so, like, it's hard for me to know even like what people mean by Scotus's position, because I'll find Jesuits and Scotists like arguing different, like so different that they even take like opposite positions on it.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. So I thank you for that. I thank you for coming on in such a short notice. Um, And I love you, bro. We'll talk to you a little bit later.
Yes,
Talk
sir.
to you a little
Sounds
later.
good. And for Inquisitor, if you're talking about Baxter, yes, I agree with, and I love, and I venerate Saint Baxter.
Okay. Okay. Well, God bless, bro. Thank you for. I mean, if you, I know if you have to go, you can stay on because I'm going to bring Inquisitor on. But if you have to go, you can leave. But I'm going to go ahead and bring him on in a
Yeah,
second.
I'll probably keep listening in, but yeah, I'm gonna go out now.
Okay. Yeah. God bless. God bless.
Yes, sir. See you.
Hey. All right. So we're going to move on to the next guest in our stream. Is Inquisitor. So this is his channel. This is his channel. This is his Twitter here. Let's just go ahead and bring him in. We're going to discuss some stuff on justification. Nothing too crazy. But let me bring him on. Yo, you there?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah. What's up, bro?
Not much. So
Let me bring.
you've been discussing Newman in DMs. You talked about Newman some in your last stream. I thought it'd be useful to go through his stream of justification.
Just a little bit. I can bring him up. Let's bring up the appendix so we can go over.
I see the main difference between the Reformed and Rome on justification as being the question of whether or not the Christian requires ongoing static non-imputation in order for them to be acceptable and their works to not be in violation of the law. Would you agree with that assessment?
The main difference between the Roman Catholics and the Reformed is that you said that the Reformed require
ongoing remission in a way that Rome does not.
Let me ask you a question. Do you
Mhm.
think that there still remains a relation of being forgiven in the justified? Do you think that's compatible? Like that is a position that, because I might not be familiar. Is that a position that the Roman Catholics can hold? Is that there is kind of this relation between God and man of continually
So
being
no,
forgiven?
because of how you understand fulfillment of the law and how you understand concupiscence. Because one of the things that's important for your view of concupiscence is it's not merely a non-imputation, but there's nothing even that could be imputed.
Okay, there's not merely a non-imputation, but there's okay. So let me ask you this. Okay, I get what you're saying, because you're saying if there is nothing that remains that is sinful, then there is nothing that is continually being forgiven.
Correct.
What about like a relation that has to do with time, like like uh, like you were once forgiven, or I don't know. I'm just throwing stuff out there.
You don't have to continually non-impute sins that are not forgiven, because to forgive a sin is simply to not impute that sin.
Okay.
So like it would just be redundant.
Okay. No, I get that. Okay. And so now relate this back to Newman.
So the reason I wanted to talk about how he views the form here is because in the debate over what the form of justification is, there's a few different ways of speaking about it, and there's a lot of ways to make it semantic, right? And the way Newman understands the priority of infusion here, I would argue, is semantic, because the fundamental question is, what is the basis on which man is right standing before God? And we'll get into that in what he says principally in the second part of his appendix. But if you go through this section on the tendency of wax to melt and the formal cause, he's simply saying that infusion is the proper form because it's intrinsic. And I'm saying that we can speak that way, but it doesn't answer the question at hand.
Okay. That actually reminds me of another. I don't know if you probably already seen it. Mm-hmm. I think is Newman saying this because of what he would properly define what he would probably define for the formal cause to be? Is that the reason? Correct.
Because he's trying to argue from Bellarmine that just in the formatting you say it's the proper form.
Yeah. This is related to this quote. I think you've seen this. Let me put it up. Where he basically where De Soto is basically saying that it makes no sense. Oh no, not this one, not this quote. Interesting. That's not even the quote I was looking for. I don't know what I'm talking about, but basically De Soto, is this the quote? No, it's right here. Yeah, right here. basically, De Soto says, I'm going to read this quickly, and then we can go back to Newman and read that. It's just the character, and I want you just to respond to this and how you respond. The character of our justice is not at all congruent with the justice in God or in Christ insofar as he is man. For a formal cause, as is fully accepted and received among philosophers and theologians, is a thing or quality in a subject. This is the soul is the form of a man, the light is the form of the sky, the heat is the form of something hot, white is the form of something white. For form is spoken of in relation to matter, to which it gives through being through inherence. But the justice by which Christ is formally just, and with the justice of God, is not in us. How then can it be the formal cause of our justification? Who philosophizes in such a way as to say that the formal cause of illuminated sky is the light which is in the sun, or that the form of heated water is in the heat existing in fire.
Yeah.
Therefore, okay, we stop there. And I know your position
this is going to assume some Thomist assumptions about how grace works and how God's declarations work. Because I would say that justification in the narrow sense would be the non-imputation of the acceptation. And of course, the Scotists and voluntarists generally are going to concede that this doesn't have to be intrinsic. And insofar as it's a declaration, the formal cause would be the nature of the declaration itself, which would be the remission.
Okay. Okay. No, that makes sense. Let's go back to the Newman stuff.
So I'm saying Newman's section here is just semantic. He's just saying it has to terminologically be the proper. He's not giving a basis for why man is accepted or just before God in judgment before by this.
Okay. Do you want to read a little bit of this?
Sure.
Because I'm trying to. You gotta bear with me. I'm way better at typing and thinking my thoughts out than actually going in a. I have to actually read it. And tell you what I think about it, and then let me see. Hold up, and you can just tell me when to stop. So he says, furthermore,
let's do farther Bellarmine, and then how far should we go? Let's just go down to mortification, and even as it is under the process of mortification.
Let me see where I can find that. Do you see my cursor? It's right here. Okay, tell me when to stop dragging.
No, go. You don't have to go that far down.
Mortification.
It's right before. I think that's too high.
There's Gerhard right here. Let me see. This is paragraph 10. So let's just type in mortification. It's okay. Oh, right here. All right. So right here. Stop right here.
Yeah.
Okay. Says, quote, further, Bellarmine goes on to urge that even though the formal cause be extrinsic, still, where there is an intrinsic also, there is more properly the form. For instance, it is more exact to say that fluidity is the form of melting wax than its exposure to the fire. That a Negro dressed in white would still be called a black man, and that a sinner to whom the righteousness of Christ is but imputed has for his truer form the sin which is in him, not the perfection which is counted to him. And in like manner, if he is really made righteous by inherence, whether infection be left or not, that inherent righteousness is more properly the form of his justification than a mere imputed righteousness which is without him. Whereas in the case of fides formata, which is alleged by Lutherans as an argumentum ad hominem, no other form can be assigned but an external one, namely love, whatever be the form of faith as such. And love, far from being separated from faith, is united with it by the closest and most real of all connections, as existing with it in one and the same soul. To this, Gerhard answers that the reason why the justified sinner is said to be in a state of righteousness, because of what is external to him, rather than of sin from what is internal, is that he is not really a sinner in the same sense in which he was before. For sin in the regenerate has lost its formal part, which is guilt, and has only its matter remaining. And even that is under process of mortification.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I thought when I was reading this at first, I simply thought he was just simply quoting Bellarmine. I did not. Do you think you're saying that this is him actually agreeing with Bellarmine?
He's arguing from Bellarmine.
From Bellarmine. Okay. And why do you think that this is only semantic?
Because he's not interested in the basis of the acceptation, and he's not interested in the basis of remission, which are the fundamental questions.
Yeah. Okay.
And we agree the intrinsic form is infusion.
Is infusion,
right?
correct.
But
Yeah.
we would say that it's not sufficient in itself to stand just before God, right?
Okay.
And then if you go to the second appendix, well, the second portion of the appendix, it's really important to understand merit. I mentioned Lena's. Did you ever get a chance to read Lena's Critiques of Serapando?
I'm so sorry. I did not get to it, bro.
Okay. So Newman's going to say that the form of original sin is done away with, right? So there's nothing sinful in it. And we agree that original sin ceases to be sin, and if one means sin based off of the imputation of guilt, right? Which is one of the ways Augustine will speak of something being sin. So the question is, what is the basis for this? Is it following the Tridentine line of everything about it being sin is obliterated? Or is it based off of an ongoing non-imputation? And the way Lena's points this against Serapando is the question of good works. Because Serapando is going to say that for good works to be acceptable, they have to have a non-imputation of the fault in that work. Right?
Okay.
And this doesn't make sense under a Roman view of the law. But it does make sense from a Protestant view of the law. So this is one of the ways Lena's is demonstrating the problem of Serapando's position. Does that make sense?
Yes, it makes sense. Okay, so let me ask. So you're saying so let's first deal with the law part.
Yeah.
For the difference in the law between the Reformed and the Roman Catholics is that you think that you think, and you can just obviously correct me if I'm wrong. There, to me, the way it seems is that okay, there's two differences in the law. Is that the law? Do you think that the law is always understood to be, well, the commandment of God, is taken not only to be in terms of the proper parts, but it's also in terms, at least for in this life, it's also in terms of like its degree in its perfection.
Yeah, let me send you a quote from Robert Barron, which I think will be useful for this.
Okay.
You can put it up if you want.
Yeah.
I'll send you on Twitter.
Okay.
This is from Robert Barron's work on mortal and venial sin.
All right, let's put this. I'll pull it up for everyone. Show more, and I'll copy it to my.
I also think it's important to distinguish the sense of the law of Christ versus the law of innocency. Because we can speak of a fulfillment of the law of Christ, but we would want to push against a fulfillment of the law of innocency.
Okay. Trying to see if I can, because the way that's formatted is insane. Give me a second. Where is the format?
You can also just pump it into an AI and ask it to
Yeah. You're right. I was thinking just about doing that. Okay, give me a second. It's coming right here. Actually, and I can really just share the screen of the AI. That's way better. So it says, quote, and this is Robert Barron. It says, quote, "For our theologians teach that the perfection which God in scriptures, Genesis, Matthew, Colossians, 2 Timothy, requires from as all necessary for salvation is the perfection not of degrees, but of parts. And this they confess is not only possible, but also that the faithful actually attain it. Whence the most illustrious Pareas in Bellarmine, Book 4 and Justification, Chapter 11, response to the second kind of testimonies, quote, in the places he says, quote, alleged which attribute perfection to some, or require it from all, perfection is understood, not of degrees or of that degrees of obedience, which the rigor of the law requires, but perfection of parts. That is a true zeal of obeying God, of repugnant lust, and the beginning of obedience according to all the commandments of God. Similarly, they teach that our good works, although they are imperfectly good, please God in Christ, and consequently, that obedience which we render to the law is graciously accepted by God, as if it were absolutely perfect. See your Sinus Catechetical Explications, Part 3. Place on good works, question 4, in Pereira's Book 4 of Bellarmine on Justification, Chapter 15, Responsible Testimony 7, where he thus writes, quote, "Yet the works of the faithful are said to please God on the throne of mercy on account of Christ accepting them, not because they are absolutely good in themselves, but he holds them accepted as if such, because they are the," how you pronounce this word?
Obsequies.
Obsequies of sons. Since therefore that obedience which God graciously accepts is necessary and according to the covenant of grace sufficient for salvation, and since that obedience which is possible for us through the aid of the Holy Spirit, from the opinion of our theologians, is graciously accepted by God, it manifestly follows that measure of obedience which is possible for us through the aid of the Holy Spirit, from the opinion of our theologians, is under this gracious covenant sufficient for salvation. So let me see what.
So this is about the fulfillment of the law of Christ.
Correct. Okay, so what exactly is being imputed when we do any particular act under grace? Like, what exactly is obviously, because every work doesn't. Do you think that every work of the faithful is stained by concupiscence?
In a certain sense, yes. And Newman will actually say this explicitly.
Okay.
So because we hold that concupiscence, even in habitual state, is sinful, necessarily every act that flows forth of the person is in some way tainted by it. And therefore, no act is at the full perfection of the law. There's always some sense in which it misses the necessary perfection.
Yeah. Okay. Then I think, and so that's where the continual non-imputation is placed in. Okay.
Because the issue is about concupiscence and then how concupiscence impacts the law.
Okay, that makes sense. And so, how would you? Because I'll probably want to be good with this. How would you understand the Roman Catholic view of the law?
I mean, there's a few different perspectives on it. I typically use the Thomist because it's the most common and it's really respected.
Okay.
The way I see Thomas on the fulfillment of the law is that the fulfillment of the law is more so about end than the particular aspects of all of it. So he would say that love fulfills the law insofar as love orients God as your chief end. And insofar as you've got God as your chief end, you'd be in fulfillment to the precept of the law.
Yep. Okay. So that's the Thomist view. And I want to pull up a quote, but okay. And so you're saying that Newman agrees with your view or the Protestant view of the law, and at least the early Newman here.
Well, you're reading 73 Newman.
Yeah. Well,
he doesn't change it much in the different versions, but this is the latest version.
Okay. I'm about to make a tweet that I'm live with you. Give me a second. Covering justification. I can't type. Okay, so let's go back to the Newman stuff. And let me pull up the stuff. Okay, so you're saying that. Okay, so now let's get back. So the original part with when he was citing Bellarmine is that he was placing. It seemed as if he was placing the formal cause of justice in to be something that's intrinsic, like grace or whatever, sanctifying grace.
Which we can grant. It's just the sense of how.
Okay. And you're saying what actually shows that he's not holding the Trinitine view is his view of the law and how the law works and how that plays a part with
the and this is shown really clearly on Good Works.
Okay. Okay, because I mean, look, I don't think I've ever claimed that Newman was in a completely agreement with us. I did remember asking Wagner before, I asked him twice. At one point, he thought it was an agreement with the, and I think you've talked to him before about this.
Yes.
At one point, he thought it could be compatible with Trent. Then at a later point, he said he actually doesn't think it's compatible with Trent. So this is really interesting to me. Let me see. Okay, so where can you take me to the part he says this in the appendix, right, where he talks about the
Yeah.
Okay,
Go to I observe then.
Okay, right here. And you want me to just read this one paragraph?
Read this and then translate the Cyprian and the Hilary. The Hilary in particular is really important.
Okay. Copy both of those and then put it into ChatGPT. All right, let's go back to the Newman. All right, let's read that while it's translating. So he says, I observe then that the point is not whether we can have any real righteousness before God, whether we can have any real righteousness before God justifies us, nor whether we are not justified by Christ's righteousness imputed, nor whether our own righteousness is pure enough to be acceptable without a continual imputation of
Notice
his.
that. Notice that.
So he says, I observe then that the point is not, and then he says, no, nor whether our own righteousness is pure enough to be acceptable without a continual imputation of his. Okay, but when
She's conceding that point. Hello?
I observe, can you hear me now? I think I'm back.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. My Wi-Fi does that. Ugh, okay.
So the Protestants concede we have a real righteousness, and the Protestants concede that, and the Papists concede that there is an imputation, but then he's just taking as a general concession that our own righteousness is not pure enough to be acceptable without a continual imputation.
Okay, let me see.
And if you continue down, he brings this out more.
Okay, we'll keep going. Nor whether our own righteousness is pure enough to be acceptable without a continuing imputation of his, on all which the fathers are clear, but whether they do not also teach that our righteousness after justification, as far as it goes, is real, tending to fulfill the perfect law, and such as to be a beginning, outset, or ground on which, when purified and completed by Christ's righteousness, God may justify us. That they do teach this, the passages which in the notes
You could
but I will
again.
hear at yeah, no, my Wi-Fi is acting a mess. But I will here add the testimonies of 3 other fathers separated from each other in place and time as specimens of the unanimous teaching of the early church. Okay, and then the quotes from the fathers. Let's share this screen. Zoom in. Wait, I actually translate that. This is so embarrassing. Translate. Okay. So first, Cyprian, to whose doctrine assent is given in the homily of almsdeed, says, when the Lord at his coming has healed the wounds which Adam had brought, and had cured the old poisons of the serpent, he gave a law to the one who made whole, and commanded him not to sin any more, lest something worse should happen to the sinner. We were hemmed in and shut up in a narrow place by the requirement of innocence. Nor would the weakness and feebleness of human frailty have anything it could do unless again the divine mercy, coming to our aid, had opened a certain way of preserving salvation when the works of justice and mercy were shown, so that whatever stains we afterwards contract, we may wash away by alms. The Holy Spirit speaks in the divine scriptures and says, quote, by almsgiving and by faith sins are purged. Certainly not those sins which have been previously contracted, for those are purged by the blood and sanctification of Christ. Again, he says, quote, as water extinguishes fire, so almsgiving extinguishes sin. Here also it is shown and proved that just as by the washing of saving water, it. Bro, I really apologize. I don't know what's going on with my stuff. And because once in baptism the remission of sins is given, the continual and unceasing exercise of good works, being an imitation of baptism, again bestows forgiveness from God. Okay, explain the importance of this.
So this one doesn't really matter. It's more so the Hillary quote. Just for context for any Romanists listening, yes, we agree almsgiving remits sins.
All right, let's go to St. Hilary. St. Hilary, in like manner, declares in the following passage both the value of good works and their insufficiency. Hope is in the mercy of God until the age and until the ages of ages. For those whose works of righteousness themselves are not sufficient for the merit of perfect blessedness, unless the mercy of God, even in this will to be righteous, does not reckon the faults of human changes and impulses. Hence the saying of the prophet, quote, your mercy is better than life, because although the life of the just is praiseworthy through the exercise of righteousness, yet through the mercy of God, it obtains more merit. For from this life it advances into life eternal, and the operation of righteousness is rewarded by the mercy of God in this way, that having pity on the will for righteousness, he grants that each just person also becomes a sharer of his eternity. Okay, go ahead and explain.
So this, I think it's important to ask what type of righteousness he's speaking of. He's not speaking of a merely human righteousness, because he's speaking of the righteousness of the just person. And he's speaking of this as a true movement of righteousness to God. So this is a person acting under sanctifying grace. That being said, he's saying that even the motion to the good of someone under sanctifying grace is not in itself sufficient to eternal life. Why? Because of human faults and imperfections. Oh, do you frame it in this translation? Human changes and impulses.
Yeah.
That's referring to concupiscence. And he's saying that because of this, it's not so perfect that it's acceptable to eternal life unless God chooses to not impute the imperfection in those acts.
Okay. Okay. I think I understand. Bro, I'm so sorry. This is bad. I don't know. Okay, I'm trying to think of a way that someone like a Roman Catholic would read this text.
Typically, they'd want to say it's human righteousness, but that just doesn't make sense contextually.
Yeah, I don't think I would explain that in terms of human righteousness. I mean, someone could say that. What if someone said that what he means here by, there, because I can see where he says, okay, unless the mercy of God, even in this will to be righteous, is not reckon the faults of human changes and impulses. It seems to be like there's a kind of new non-imputation there, or like for those those emotions which you're saying are from concupiscence.
Mm-hmm.
What if someone said that? I don't know. I'm really
The issue is he takes this as universally true of good works, and a lot of the Roman answers would try and qualify some works might be like this, but not others. But that's not his point. And I'll also note Augustine quotes this in full in Contra Julian, and doesn't qualify it either.
Could dude, my Wi-Fi is so bad, bro. This is so horrible. Okay, so let me see. I'm trying to think.
This is why I'm stressing Newman's emphasis on our good works and our justice require ongoing imputation.
Yeah. Okay, so what if someone says that where he says
You could consider turning your camera off. That might help.
Yeah,
Just
maybe if
less
I
of a
turn my
strain.
camera. Yeah, it might actually be my camera. Okay, so we'll keep trying from here. I was gonna say, what if someone said that when he talks about it being from mercy, it's because the reward is given from mercy itself.
He ties the insufficiency due to the works being corrupted.
Yeah, I guess he does talk about the human changes and motions. So I had to think about how I
So
even understand that.
you can't explain this at all from a Thomist way. A Scotist way would say it's not sufficient taken in itself, like in first act.
Yeah.
The problem is he grounds the insufficiency in the imperfection. That's only Protestant.
Okay. Yeah. I wonder if De Soto comments on this. Probably doesn't, because I would have remembered if he commented on this. Why not take this to be? Why not take the human changes and impulses? Why not think that he's already conceding that these things are somewhat consented to?
Well, he's universalizing it to it works, so that's just not possible. And Newman's also universalizing it
because it's to all works. That's what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I was just thinking about some ways so someone can understand it.
When Augustine quotes this, he applies it universally to the whole life of a Christian too.
Yeah. My bad. Okay. Yeah. Okay. No, I think so far the way I'm looking at it, I think your explanation probably makes the most sense. I'm not familiar with this quote. And I think I have seen it actually once before, and I might have posted about it. So let me actually go look on my Twitter and see if I posted. And then you can just respond to some explanations that I think I've.
But I think you'd agree with the way I'm framing out the debate and what issues that matter, and therefore, yeah.
I think the way that, and since you're saying this is, and I mean, like, I'm not here to argue about whether Newman held this or not. I just want to actually understand, because we are preparing for a video. Okay. Let me pull up this. I actually have said something about this before, but this is just me quoting Vasquez and Bellarmine. I don't know if this actually responds to what you're saying, so let me check. Let's see. Okay, so I think this is the quote, right? For those very works of righteousness would not suffice for the merit of perfect beatitude, unless the mercy of God, even in this righteous will of human changes and movements, does not count the faults. He says, I respond that Hilary here teaches only that the mercy of God is necessary for the remission of venial sins, which could delay us from attaining eternal life. However, there are other words of his in the same place that are much more difficult in this manner, where he says, quote, because although the life of the just becomes commendable through the operation of justice, nevertheless, through the mercy of God, it will obtain more merit. For from this life, but show we're going to have to wrap this up quick because I don't know what's going on, but shows that the merits themselves are rewarded beyond cognitivity in some way. In that sense, in which Fulgentius also said the same thing, namely because an eternal reward is granted for temporal merit. In this, as I said above, in this very chapter, attention is paid not to what is dignified in the work itself, but to that which is formally in it. Do you think that even addresses what your concern is?
No, I agree with condign merit.
Okay, let's go to Bellarmine. Let's see if he addresses.
And also, I can spend a lot of time talking about venial sin, but if you want it to go quick, then I don't have to.
Yeah. Bro, I don't know why. I might have to check my Wi-Fi or something. I don't know what's going on. It was good for the first half, whereas with Edwin. But let's see. So he quotes that saying. This is Bellarmine. We'll go really quickly. So he says, the explanation of this passage must be sought from those things which we said in response to the first rejection of the preceding chapter. For Hilary only teaches that certain sins are mixed in with good merits, which, although they do not make a man unjust, doesn't address it. Okay. All right, this doesn't address it. I guess people have used this quote for the on relation to I guess meriting, or like the merit of good works. It's not
Well,
the
Bellamy is trying to prove that you can have a mix of sin and be just, right?
but that's
But
not
I
what you're
concede.
concerned with. Yeah, okay, yeah, I'll have to do some more reading on this particular quote then. But okay, so let's bring this back to Newman.
So our views on baptism, right? We both agree original sin is no longer counted to damnation. But the question is why? And a lot of authors don't get into the mechanics super precisely. So it's useful to look at other views that follow from certain perspectives on this. And the easiest one is good works. And this is one of the things Lane has targets against Sarah. Like that Trent, this is the major point he goes for.
Okay. Okay, that's good. This is I haven't thought about it let me pull this back up. I haven't thought about this from this perspective. Like, I remember you texted me and you were telling me about thinking about the differences in this way. So I think this is actually a good way to flesh out the differences. So I'll remember to write this down. You'll remember. I know you'll remember. Okay. So this is one way you can understand the disagreement, is insofar as the law and on ongoing non-imputation. Is there any other way that you could flesh out the differences between Rome and the Reformed?
Well, there's we agree in infused justice. If we could even there's Roman views and Reformed views on the nature of grace that can be identical, right?
Yeah.
And I think mechanically on imputation, we can basically agree. So the question is going to be the basis of the acceptation. And the reason for the basis of the acceptation is not due to the nature of infused justice taken itself, but due to the nature of the law. And because of a difference on the view of the nature of the law, we then enter into some of our stuff on concupiscence, right?
Yeah.
Because concupiscence is sin habitually. And therefore, in this life, so long as you have carnal concupiscence, you do not have perfection of the law of innocency. And then also, it's mortal because we deny true venial sin exists.
Correct. Okay. No, that makes sense. Okay. So let me repeat what you said. You said basically the problem you have, what the difference is what the basis of acceptation is. Correct. And you're saying the basis is on the law, right? That's for the Reformed, or is that me? Obviously, yeah. This is the law.
Well, we wouldn't say we're accepted under the law of innocency ever. We would say you're accepted under the law of Christ.
The law of Christ, correct. Okay.
But you remember the quote from Augustine we've gone back and forth on, where he says, "Man fulfills the law insofar as whatever he does not fulfill is forgiven."
Yeah, it's forgiven. Yeah,
that's super Reformed.
Yeah, I'm familiar with that quote. Okay.
He presumes that you never have perfect obedience, but that you need remission of it to be in accord.
Yeah. Okay. Trying to think of some other ways. So those are some of the ways. I'll go back to this video so I can remember, because I think in the video we should probably discuss obviously the agreements, obviously the disagreements, and then whether it remains a cause for separation. Do you think entrant is? I mean, so for example, do you in the canons or the decrees? Is there anything that you in session 6? Is there anything you actually do object to?
I mean, I have to go canon by canon, but I would say that canon 10 directly bans my view and bans all the double formal views.
Let's go to canon 10 real quick.
Canon 11 would ban only imputation, but canon 10 is designed to kill the double formal view.
If anyone says the merits whereby he without the merits, without the justice of Christ,
it's the second half that matters.
The second, yeah, whereby he merited for us to be justified, or that it is by that. Justice itself. I read this in the way that okay, I'm back. I mean, do you think that they're so in this part of the canon? Do you think that they're denying? Because do you think they're also I mean, I think implicitly they are denying it from other places, but here, couldn't someone just read this as by denying that they're denying that they are justified by the justice that is in Christ, not the benefits that he bestowed?
That's simply not how the canon's received.
So you think that's not how the canons are received?
Like you can read De Soto or you can read Bellarmine, and they view this as banning the double form view. This is also the reading of Alphonsus. I've only found one post-Trent Romanist that takes the Pigio style view as being allowed.
Okay. Let's read them Canon 11. And if anyone saith that men are justified either by the sole imputation of the justice of Christ or by the sole remission of sins, to the exclusion of grace and charity, which is poured forth in their hearts by the Holy Ghost, and is inherent in them, or even that the grace whereby we are justified is only the favor of God, let them be anathema. Okay, what do you have problems with this?
No, I don't think Canon 11 necessarily touches my view because I believe in infused justice. But Canon 10 is distinct from Canon 11.
Okay, that's great. Okay, interesting. I'll have to go back.
You see what Bellarmine says this bans the view.
Wait, Canon 10?
Yeah, Canon 10.
I think I saw a quote that someone posted from Bellarmine on that.
I believe I've sent it to you. Samuel also tweeted it recently.
Yeah. And I mean, obviously, I agree that the double. But I thought we talked. And you said you don't necessarily affirm a dual form, because like you can affirm a dual form of cause in the sense that one is proper, one is improper. And I would in some sense, I guess I would even affirm that, but
that's not quite what the antidogma is getting at.
Okay.
The antidogma is trying to say that if our infused justice is viewed under imputation, then it can be accepted. So, like, are you familiar with like Newman's analogy of like the painting and the frame?
I think I saw that. Yeah, go ahead and explain it.
So, like, within the analogy, the infused justice would be the painting itself, and then the imputation would be the frame. So the painting hangs, but the painting's hanging is dependent on the imputation. And that's what the antidogma is getting at.
Okay, wait. You're saying the painting is the what again?
The painting would be the infusion.
The infusion. The frame would be the
imputation. So that the hanging of the painting is dependent on the frame.
Hanging of the painting depends on the frame. But does Newman think that imputation is logically prior to infusion?
He's not super. So there's a lot of Newman that's really unclear, which I think you'd grant.
Yeah.
Okay. So if you speak of imputation in some ways like Thomas, well, you have it as the order of intention. But then if you read him in other places, he clearly doesn't understand it that way, so it's a little confused. He also speaks a lot about the divine indwelling, but he's not clear on what that is or what it constitutes, so I just read it as infused justice.
Okay, because like with that kind of analogy, obviously that might not be obviously he's not using the analogy in that for that to explain the priority, but obviously in that analogy, the frame would be logically prior to the painting. But okay, I just wanted to know what you thought of his views, and you say he's not clear on that.
That's a big problem with Newman. Just generally, he's not that clear in this work.
Okay, I enjoyed rereading this. I actually didn't get down to down here.
He's a phenomenal writer. He's so much fun to read.
Yeah. I finished the first part of the first appendix. I didn't finish the second, the continued. But yeah, no, I actually did.
This is also where he says the difference of his view with Bootser and Davenant is semantic.
Yep. He went over the different. He's like, let's go back to he explained how that his view is actually acceptable. I think when it came to I think it was the formal cause. He called it like a high church view right here. Because he says like, indeed, it is no point of faith with the Roman Catholics to take the view which I have called Roman, but still I shall so call it, as holding the place among the which our so-called high church doctrine does among us. That is, as being generally received orthodox and legitimate exposition of the formularies. And the high church view is the view of 2 and 3, where he says, upon our holiness and works under the covenant of Christ's merits, or in other words, sanctified and completed by Christ's merits, or that our faith is mercifully appointed as a substitute of perfect holiness, and thus in the interposing and acceptable principle between us and God. He says that some Romanists could actually affirm to.
Yeah, but the Romanists he cites are the Romanists I would claim is siding with me, like Serapando, Regensburg, Antidrama.
Okay. I have some stuff I think about Contarini. I've been reading, and then you can probably send me some resources on that. I see that the Wallenberg brothers are trying to like retrieve him back from the Protestants in their treatise. But obviously, the way that they are trying to retrieve him is by imposing like a kind of logical priority that you think, and I actually think I would actually agree with.
Just not tenable because of his views of sin.
Yeah. Okay, I haven't read Contarini and what he says about sin, so I would take your word on that one. Okay. I think that's it's pretty much because my Wi-Fi might go out.
You'd agree the Romanists he relies on are the double formless style views.
Let me go back. I don't know if he named. I know he did name I think he named Contarini in here.
Just controlling.
Yeah, he did. Yep. Contarini here. I remember that.
Serapando, the Bishop of Otranto, who's Protestant.
Yep. And
he cites the Antidogma in the second section. Mm-hmm. He cites the Antidogma. He quotes it in full. The main section. He quotes Regensburg, and then he says Regensburg isn't Protestant, which I don't know what reading you want to take of Regensburg, but I think you'd at least grant that the majority reading of Regensburg is Protestant.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even think I don't disagree with that. So I have to dang.
Like one of the problems you run into is a vast majority of the major counter-reformers that would heavily interact with Protestants just hold to a fundamentally Protestant view of justification.
Yep. Okay. I'm trying to think of some other stuff. I mean, we can answer some of these questions in here that I know someone had. Like for example, DoorDash Thomist. He says, Inquisitor, have you read Sheban's sources of theological knowledge?
I haven't read it.
Okay, so what are your thoughts on this argument? Okay. Here's Rod. Here from Twitter, you guys seem very intelligent. Who should I read more on this topic? I'm reformed. 3FU. Really only have read Zonky, Perkins, Remegles. You got some suggestions?
I mean, it would depend a little on what you want to know. If you want to read on the debate specifically between the Protestants and the Romanists on what the true differences are, no one is better than LeBlanc. Which, funnily enough, is the exact paragraph that you have open where he cites LeBlanc.
Yeah. Or I noticed that he actually references a lot of ironic a lot of the people that I have been reading recently that I didn't notice the first time I read it. When the first time I read it, I was actually just really new and introduced to Justification. But then when I read like most of this again, I was like, wait, he's quoting LeBlanc. He's quoting a lot of different people.
He quotes Davenport too.
Yep.
But Davenport's Protestant.
Let's move to some other question.
Oh yeah, Rod, read Davenant. He's good too.
Yeah, Davenant. Yeah.
Yeah, the issue I have with Sheban is I don't really think his view is properly able to say concupiscence is formally sinful because its sinfulness is dependent on the infusion. So in the privation, he wouldn't say that carnal concupiscence just taking itself habitually is damnable. And one of the ways this is drawn out in the criticism I've made against Sheban as an explanation of Augustine is Sheban's model is fundamentally unable to explain infant damnation. And what I mean by that is not simply the privation of eternal life, but the torment of infants. And that's only possible if you take concupiscence taken itself to be mortally sinful.
Let me try to respond to that a little bit. And okay, well, and this is, I mean, I have a mixed view. I had to think about specifically from Sheban's perspective. And that's so first of all, think you're. Let me see. I think you're right. I think you're right to some degree. I'm trying to think. So let me see. Let me explain how I understand Sheehan's view. So the way he explains that concupiscence is formally sinful in the unregenerate is that by saying that first he admits that. I mean, there's a couple of things. I mean, so the first thing he admits is that he thinks that there is a kind of obligation on the part of the creature to prevent certain sinful effects, some of the effects of sin that a man has. Now, whether what is it?
Thomas does this. This doesn't go far enough.
Yeah, and then whether this gets past whether this is only imputed as to venial sin or mortal sin or original sin, that is a question, and I'm still reading Sheehan.
Well, the problem is this can't answer infant damnation. This is only relevant for adults.
Yeah. Let me keep going here. So that's the first thing. He thinks that there is some kind of obligation, some kind of command on the creature to not have such and such effects. But he also says that the formality of concupiscence, the formality of that guilt that concupiscence has, he thinks that formality is in the voluntary will of Adam when he sinned. And so by him voluntarily sinning, he says that Adam could foresee the effects that would arise from his sinning. And so when concupiscence was unleashed due to his sin, it had with it that voluntary act of Adam. And so concupiscence was then brought about in a culpable way. And so since it's brought about in a culpable way, he says that it is imputed with punishment by God. Now, like Inquisitor was saying, and that's something I've still been working out, is okay, well, this could all be true. But the real question is going to be, okay, how does this relate to infant damnation? And how does this explain some of the texts of St. Augustine? What I've been thinking about and how the way I was trying. So the first thing is I don't know if you ever got to translate that quote I sent you from St. Augustine. I know it was long.
I did. I need to check. Isn't that early Augustine?
That might actually be.
Because early Augustine does hold a middle view.
Yeah, correct. Let me go back to the quote. I think that might actually be. But the quote I sent you was, he uses the term fire, and he says that the term fire designates punishment generally, but not something to a particular nature. What do you think about that? I mean, you can push back. I'm just.
Let's grant that that's a possible use of the semantics. I would argue that contextually, and especially in the views he's critiquing, late Augustine does understand true infant torment. I also would question the sense in which infants are truly punished under a limbo model.
Okay. Well, let me see if I can explain that. So I appreciate your explanation or responding to the fire, the quote, what stuff about the fire. So now your question is, in what sense are infants actually punished in limbo?
I mean, we can take Thomas, right?
Yeah.
Like, if you take Thomas, the punishment, I mean, just on a side note, let's describe the Pelagian view of the middle state that Augustine condemns.
Yeah.
They don't receive the beatific vision, but there's nothing for them to be tormented on. And not only that, they have a perfect natural beatitude. So they have a perfect worldly happiness.
Yeah.
So it's a place of rest and reprieve, right?
Yeah.
But they're not specific on where it's located. Now, you get Thomas fixing the problems with this view. Infants, due to their lack of having sanctifying grace, don't receive the beatific vision. But because they have nothing in themselves to make themselves worthy of torment, they receive natural beatitude, have rest and reprieve. We've placed the location of this rest, reprieve, and natural beatitude in hell. So now we're calling it condemnation.
Oh, let me. This is what I would say. I would say that the first way in which it could be understood as a punishment is that it's because there is a loss of a good that was in some sense due to the creature.
I would deny it's due.
Okay, well, then that's where that's what we would start with. And I mean, we can get into a back and forth in this, but I'm just explaining my view, and then you can. I haven't really. I'm not the best at explaining this, so you can kind of explain to the audience what I'm exactly trying to get at. But you start with original justice.
Yeah.
And you start, and basically the explanation is that okay, in Adam there were two effects of grace. There great in or original justice. The first effect was freedom from concupiscence. The second effect was the ability to first be in friendship with God, but also the ability to merit eternal life from God. And that in Adam, since the whole nature consisted in Adam, eternal life was due to him having grace. Eternal life was due not only to Adam and Eve, but also to his entire progeny. De Soto explains this with an example of a slave, and a king, and he said the king says, "You have been a good and faithful servant. Here is some land far, far away that is for you and for your progeny. So long as you do not rebel against me, you and your progeny will have or bear the fruits of this reward." But then you explain, okay, well then what is original sin? Original sin is some act of transgression against God. Due to that act of transgression, there was the loss of sanctifying grace. And that loss of sanctifying grace was at once owed, in its loose sense, to all of eternal life was once owed to all of Adam's progeny, insofar as he had the entirety of human nature in him, and then it was lost. And so when I'm almost done. When you relate back to the servant and the king, or the slave and the king, the slave transgresses against the king after receiving that reward. So then the king takes away the land that was once given to him. And so when the slave has reproduces and his progeny begins to comes into being, none of his progeny have that that good that was once due to them. Obviously, the analogy is not perfect, but that is the way that I kind of understand where the punishment aspect is. But you can respond.
So I would say that sanctifying grace, just by its nature, has a fittingness to eternal life. That being said, I would say that the right to eternal life would be based off of the keeping of the covenant of works.
Okay.
So Adam would have received that for himself and his posterity if he had kept it, but it's a right upon the keeping thereof, and he did not keep it, and as such, they do not possess the right. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah. Okay.
So I grant the basic fittingness, but clarification is probably useful for the audience, is because the Reformed take the view that carnal concupiscence is sinful and a violation of the law, we would say that since God must create something in accordance with its natural end, and man's natural end includes the keeping of the natural law, Adam would have been created in order to be in accordance with his natural end with original rectitude, which would be a form of of grace. So we would say that just naturally Adam must be created with not sanctifying grace, but a degree of grace in order to have his faculties ordered by reason.
Yep.
And then on top of this, we would then say that God so willed to also give Adam sanctifying grace. But irrespective of that, he must be created with original rectitude just by default.
Yep. And I think the anthropology there is really important. And you think you recommended I talk to who about original
Jordy Heilemore for Jonathan Ramond are both super into this.
Okay.
I'm sure you're familiar with it's standard in Augustinian scholarship to read Augustine as denying that Adam could have been created with carnal concupiscence.
I'm not familiar with that, but if you can send me,
there's different views on why. Like the Jansenists take a different solution than the Reformed, but the same general problem is acknowledged among the super staunch Augustinians.
Okay, what do you think about this quote then?
Mm-hmm.
He says, quote, this is in Contra Julian. He says,
Mhm.
what is that nakedness revealed after eating the forbidden fruit, if not that sin laid bare what grace had covered? For the
Mhm.
grace of God was great there, where the earthly and natural body did not have bestial lust.
Mhm.
Therefore, he who clothed with grace had nothing in his naked body to be ashamed of. Once stripped of grace, felt what he ought to cover. I haven't really, I don't know. I'm
So
trying
how
to,
does that matter?
let me see if I can make the connection that I was trying to get at here. So, okay, so first he says that, so he's asking rhetorical, well, not rhetorical, but he's asking, what is that nakedness that was revealed? So then when it says Adam and Eve knew they were naked and they were ashamed, he's asking, what is that they had, that sin had actually revealed in them, that grace had once covered? So there was this nakedness that Adam and Eve had,
Mhm.
right? But sin covered that, grace, not sin, grace covered this nakedness that they had. And then I'll get into what I think the nakedness is. He says, for the grace of God was great there, where the earthly and natural body did not have bestial lust. So the grace of God was great there, where prior to them eating the fruit,
Mhm.
and in that prior to eating the fruit, that earthly body and the earthly and natural body did not have bestial lust. Well, obviously, this he's saying the grace of God was a cause of them not having
Yeah.
was a cause of them
Well,
not
A,
having.
he doesn't specify the grace, and B, I can also just read him as taking the Jansenist view
Okay, and I'm not from. What is the Jansenist view? You can explain that.
that Adam would have had to be created with sanctifying grace.
Would have had to be created with sanctifying grace. Okay. Okay. I'm just asking questions. Hold up. Therefore, he who clothed with grace had
I think
nothing.
your argument, even if I accept all of your presuppositions, just forces Jansenism as opposed to negating any of my arguments.
Okay. That's something I definitely need to get more into, the Jansenist stuff. You can send me some stuff on that.
I have all of the Augustinus translated.
Okay. I haven't read Nucellus, but I have talked to what's his name?
Do you want me to send you the quote where he says this?
Okay. I have talked to Omega Point, and he's has some stuff to say about Nucella. He thinks I'm not trying to bring up any like like stuff, but he thinks that Inquisitor's reading of Nucella is of Nucella of Augustine is wrong.
So is he saying he thinks Nisla is wrong, or he thinks my reading of Nisla is wrong?
He thinks your reading of Nucella is wrong. And he emailed him actually recently. So he emailed him recently, and so we should hopefully, cross our fingers, we should get a response to that. But yeah, I haven't read him. I haven't actually read many people on Augustine and concupiscence besides De Soto, besides Sheeman. I've read some stuff, some quotes that people have provided from Gregory of Rimini. I think that's his name.
Rimini follows my view.
Rimini, yeah. Well, what do you think about this quote now that we're on him? Are you familiar with, let me pull it up because I translated it and it was so long ago. Give me a second. It's like I think this guy's a Jesuit. And you sent me, what quote did you just send me?
That's from Nisula.
Okay, Nisula. Okay. I'll read that in a minute. Let me show you this quote that I actually translated from someone. And after I actually find out what the heck where I actually put it at. It was someone that was commenting on Rimini. Jeez, where is it at? Give me a second. Jeez, bro. Rimini.
I think you've seen where he takes explicitly over your baptism and original sin.
You said Rimini?
Yeah.
Okay. Actually, I have something translated, so I can just go to my ChatGPT, and I'll bring that up. Let's see. You can talk.
Bellarmine and the STS also concede that Romani violates Trent on original sin.
Found it. I think I found it. Oh, listen to this. Hold up. I'm translating. Okay, hold up. This is on Kandai Mirror Eternal Life, where I found Remedy quoted. Dude, I don't know where I found it. Okay, we can just go over the quote that you sent me from. Actually, let me share this tab first. Or wait, let's just share this tab so I can pull up the quote first. Anybody, if you guys got any other questions, you can ask because we're not going to be on here for long. It's do you want me to translate the Latin or you want me to trans? Oh no, it's this. It's just this one.
I mean, the Latin's all technical terms. I assume you know what most of them mean.
Okay, let's try.
It's not hard Latin, but I mean you can translate it if it's simpler.
Oh no, I was just looking at that Cyprian quote. I'm so slow.
Yeah, I sent the wrong quote. That was my bad.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, let's pull up this quote that you just sent me. All right, retype. All right, so then I can share the screen and I can read it so I can see what I think about it. Okay, so here we go. It says, however, Augustine wishes to clarify some of his statements concerning riatus. Baptism affects concupiscence so that its guilt is absolved. By this, Augustine does not mean that concupiscence should be thought of as a hypostasis being, which would have its own guilt. Riatus sus, therefore, has to be understood as that guilt which remains in the person carrying the evil quality of concupiscence. Augustine points out that although baptism removes the guilt that has been casted by concupiscence, this does not sanctify or neutralize concupiscence as such. Let me reread that. Baptism. Yeah, well, you got the word absolved here.
Yeah, it's pretty technical, but
yeah. By this, Augustine does not mean that concupiscence should be thought of as a hypostatized being. Okay, so here he says, explain what you think this means. By this, Augustine does not mean that concupiscence should be thought of as a hypostatized being, which will have its own guilt. What do you think?
It's not. So it means that when you absolve a person of guilt, it's not like there's the person, then there's concupiscence, and the guilt of the concupiscence is separate from the person. Instead, it's the concupiscence is a violation in the person, and as such, there is a guilt tied to the person, but due to the concupiscence.
It's not like guilt is like attached or united to concupiscence, which is a view that I agree a lot of Roman theologians take, and that's how they understand Augustine. They think
Augustine denies this explicitly.
Oh yeah, I agree. I agree that the places in like Contra Julian.
I'm sure you were Bellamine's reading of Augustine on marriage concupiscence is explicitly the view of Julian, and Augustine denies it.
Okay. Yeah, I actually agree with that. I think, and it's funny enough, Sheben actually disagrees with that reading. He thinks that reading only works for some of the quotes of Augustine. It doesn't work for the ones that you're talking about. Like the one in the two in Contra Julian, where he says is like, oh, it's not the guilt by which concupiscence is guilty, but the guilt by which it makes man guilty, something like that. And then the one
jokes about when you absolve a murderer, you're not saying murder is okay.
Correct. Yeah, I agree that kind of associate, like saying like, there's an association of guilt with concupiscence, or that they are like united as to a composite habit or something like that. I don't think that works. Okay, so this is interesting. I need to talk to Omega Point about. Well, I think he might have actually sent me this quote and explained it, but I'll talk to him about this.
But this is the main quote because Timo Nacella does not talk about this controversy directly.
Okay.
He purposely says he wants to avoid the debate with Rome and Protestants.
Okay. that means we might not even get a response because that's exactly what I think he was trying.
But
He emailed them about.
there's a I don't know how much Augustine you've read. If you've read a lot of Augustine, with the wording Nucella uses, you know exactly the sections he's drawing from. But what's important here is that he's saying that in the mind of Augustine, there is something hideous or sinful or corrupt about concupiscence, and this is never sanctified. The violation aspect of concupiscence is never removed. It's only removed insofar as the guilt would be tied to the person.
You need to
So it retains its violation. It simply is not imputed as such.
Okay. You have that in Nisula?
That's what's that Nisula saying in the second sentence.
Oh, okay. That's how you're okay. No, that makes sense. Okay, that's how you're reading it.
I can also show the Augustine's quoting because he's mapping the language perfectly.
Hold up, give me 1 second. I'm looking for this freaking quote that I got, and you might be familiar with this guy. Give me a second. Rimini. Found it. Who is this by? This is by, I don't know who this is by, but I'm going to send you something and then I'm going to put it on the screen. It's by some Catholic.
So is this a commentator on Rimini?
Yes.
Is this a theologian or a modern scholar?
Theologian. It is
Okay.
it's not a modern scholar. Hold up. I'm going to pull up who it is. I remember I found this guy on his name is, I got his name. It's not this guy. It might be either Bertie. Johannes Laurentius Bertie.
Let me get you some Rimini.
This is the guy that I translated. And I'll read the quote. So here it is. Let's put it on the screen. Retype. And then you just tell me what you think about this.
This is what Rimini says in a sentences commentary.
Okay. And I'll read that next. He says, okay, objection 2. If concupiscence constitutes the essence of original sin, it follows that this essence remains in the reborn, which Rimini was forced to concede in distinction 30. Response. I deny the sequence, for the essence of sin does not remain in concupiscence when the guilt and stain are removed, which constitutes the former part of sin.
He could disagree, but Rimini says it does. Read the next section. He says Rimini had sided with the Herod. Right. He's saying wrong, but why?
It says in this clear sense, Rimini says that original sin remains in the reborn with regard to its essence, namely with regard to the act or material part of sin, not with regard to the guilt or formal part. For quoting the authority of St. Augustine, where he says that concupiscence is indeed inherent in the reborn, but does not harm them, he says that it is not sin in him. Thus, properly speaking, namely of guilt, okay.
Yeah, of course the guilt's removed. The question is how and why.
Therefore, Heminer wrongly says that Rimini has sided with the heretic since he nowhere departed from Augustine. I just found this somewhere, but I'm not familiar with any of the I'm not familiar with this person with Rimini. I was just looking for some material.
Again, the Protestants agree concupiscence is no longer sin in the justified. If what we mean by sin is the liability damnation.
Yeah, correct. Okay, yeah, I think it's been going on for about 2 hours. Does anybody have any other questions? We have 7 viewers. Bro, we have to work on this video that we got going on. So I need some. I'm gonna read the who did you send me again?
I forgot. What did you want to read more on?
Obviously, I wanted to read some stuff that we have on our agreements, and I wanted to read the stuff we have. I wanted to show where our agreements are and our disagreements are from Protestants.
And I'm a little curious on this. I've made a lot of objections to the Roman view tonight. Do you have any objections to the Protestant view?
Objections? I would have to think about it. I mean, obviously, a lot of the problems I would probably would have to come from more fundamental, some things that are more fundamental. Like I don't have like any formal argument or something, but like I think that the way that the command should be understood in Scripture, the commandment to love the Lord your God with your whole heart, your whole mind, whole soul. I think that should be understood in a Roman way than in a
You would
Protestant
disagree on
Reformed
the
way.
testimony of Augustine
When it comes to justification or just
in the nature of
original
the law,
sin, nature of the law.
the way he reads those texts.
I guess we probably would disagree on that. The places that I would probably go would be on the man's perfection and righteousness.
How do you deal with letter? What is it? Is it letter 146? Let me find it.
But like justification and merit, I don't really see money. I haven't really thought about much of our disagreement or like argument. Like the arguments that I see that many of our theologians make, I think are actually pretty bad.
They don't understand our views. They're not reading us.
Yeah, so I mean, let me see. This guy said, what's the video? It's on justification, like imputation and infusion, and on merit, agreement, disagreement, and whether there's a cause of separation. It's pretty much our view. I mean, what that video is going to be on. I have to actually think about it because the way
Do you agree Augustine doesn't hold to a venial sin, like true venial sin?
I'm not really for. I don't think I'm well read enough to actually state what.
Do you agree with my arguments for why a Tridentine view of original sin makes infant torment impossible?
Do you think that Trent is committed to saying that? Do you think that is a position that
I think it's by implication.
By implication, okay. Because I've heard from others that I've talked to that there is a diversity of opinion about the nature or the nature of the punishment of infants. That there isn't like it isn't dogmatic, but if you think there is by implication, you would have to show me in a Trent. I know it's the majority opinion. I mean, most people follow Thomas.
Well, I think broadly speaking, Thomas's position is followed. I don't know how a privation of sanctifying grace could make you personally worthy of torment.
Yeah, no, I get that.
Because you need something of the person that's in violation, and that can only be concupiscence.
Yeah, something personal. Yeah, I get.
This is the argument that gets used by the Augustinians and the Jansenists.
Yeah. What are some other? Because you were asking me to push back on some things, so I have to actually think. What really is the disagreements? The only thing I really can think of is really the law, and concupiscence, and maybe I guess
venial sin, but that's sort of tied.
Yeah, and I think another thing is like the kind of judgment seat, but that's also in relation to the law. So I don't know. You would have to you have to actually send me some more stuff about where our disagreements lie, and I can also write something up, or even we can go on live another time after I've actually thought about it, and I'll present some argument.
You wanted me to look at some stuff from your content on original sin. It seems that would simply just be about whether or not corner concupiscence
would exist. Natural. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's about what we mean by natural. We agree that without superadded, we agree that without whatever term we want, I'll use preternatural grace, man would have natural concupiscence. Sorry, concupiscence. But this is why we hold our view on original rectitude.
Yep. I think I agree. I guess you'd have to give me some time to actually think about our actual disagreements and then formulate an argument.
Would you push back on any of my characterization of the debate?
I gotta think about. I don't think you actually misrepresented really anything that you characterized of our view. I think you're probably the most well-read Protestant on our view. I had to go back and listen to the stream to even remember, but from what I've heard, like, obviously I kind of gave my opinion on some of the things about like punishment, why we think that it is considered punishment, but from your characterization of Rome,
Well, I
might
don't think in late Augustine it's sufficient. Like the way Augustine goes after the Pelagian view, it's clear he doesn't think it's sufficient punishment.
I think that there are some historical explanations we can get into another time. People talk about how a lot of the things you said weren't meant to be dogmatic, but were meant to be
That's a separate
rhetorical.
question.
Yeah. No, I agree. I'm just I have some explanations of that.
I think especially in the sermon that you sent me, it's really hard to make those copes.
Yeah, where he talks about fire and stuff like that. Okay.
Did I send you the section in the Augustinus where he clips on a work that was approved by multiple universities that argues for infinite torment from Augustine?
I don't know if you sent me that.
Let me send it to you now.
But yeah, I think your characterization, I'm not as familiar with like the history aspects, so I can't like really push back on that. Like when you say like, okay, do you agree that I think you said Regensburg is majority accepted by Protestants?
Well, how do you read Gropper? I know you sort of try to argue for the anti-dogma being okay, but I think the Wallenberg's reading of anti-dogma is explaining the insufficiency under Scotism, when I think the insufficiency for them is due to sin.
Yeah. I mean, I think that Gropper held to a view. I think he held to you guys' view.
Well, that means it's the way we should read the anti-dogma. Would you agree?
Yeah. I mean, I might even be able to concede that. I would push back on Contarini.
Okay.
A little bit. I have to think about, it's either Contarini or Serapando that I'm thinking about. I think
Francis thinks Serapando is banned by name.
Really? That's interesting. I mean, for Serapando, I think that his main problem wasn't that this is my reading. I think that his problem wasn't that sanctifying grace was inadequate, but that well, I think his problem was that the acts of the justified that are performed by grace, that are performed in grace, is inadequate. Like, so not sanctifying grace itself.
Yeah, that gets into the tell I was getting at. As you can see how they understand original sin through their views on good works.
Okay. Well, yeah, I'll do some. I got what you sent me on there. Okay.
I'll send you a secondary work on the debate between Serapando and Lainez too. Okay. This also gets discussed a little bit in Jedin's book on Serapando, but I sent you a translation of Lainez's critiques.
Okay. I'll definitely have to take a look at all.
Another problem with reading, do you believe Contarini and Pole had different views?
In Pole?
Yeah, Cardinal Pole.
I'm not familiar with Cardinal Pole, so.
Like who he was?
Yeah, I'm not familiar. Yeah.
He was one of the papal legates to Trent.
Okay.
He was one of the top spirituale. He agreed with Regensburg, and he writes he's very silent at Trent, but he's asked his view on justification, and he writes out a fundamentally Protestant view. After section 6, he refuses to give his papal seal to it, and he basically goes silent for 3 years after the council on justification, and then he claims that he had always held to the Tridentine view. This is just false. He was just lying about this, and he gets exposed by it later. But like, he clearly views his view as being banned.
That's how it is. What do you think about the like the historical idea, the idea that like Groper Groper was influenced indirectly by Luther by being influenced by Pelagius and Contarini? Like there's like a kind of like there's
I'm fine with that. There's obviously cross-pollination, right?
Okay. Okay, no, I'm just asking questions. You have to just send me some of the stuff on there. Like I said, I've only read the stuff I've actually read.
What do you
on
want material on?
I guess, oh no, that's a good question. We'll have to talk about this a little bit later. I just want to go ahead and get so we can keep the stream. It
Sure.
says 2 hours. I appreciate everyone from coming. I appreciate you, Inquisitor, from coming. I thank Edwin for coming, talking for about the first hour about predestination, and I thank you for interacting with me on justification. In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen.
All right.